Thank you to Commander Roth, Brian, Tom Guess, Jim, and Peg. And I do have several of the people that were on the on providing presentations here for questions. And don't forget to use the Q&A panel to put in your questions. And I do want to say, Jim Emmons very quickly said, I meant to say wake responsibly and not wait responsibly. I know we all do want to teach people how to wait responsibly, but for this venue, we were talking about wake responsibly. So appreciate that correction, Jim. So I have a question here that I would like to direct to Stephen if he's on. Is he on?
Hey, good
Yes, there
morning.
you go. All right, great. I have a great question here in that has been asked. And the question is, social media platform changes, privacy restrictions, and algorithmic delivery have made it harder to confidently say who campaign messaging is reaching. What are you doing to ensure at-risk populations such as young males are reached?
I think for that, what we look to do is really work with the platforms to understand their audience segments and understand where, if you want to use, young males as an example, um, how are they consuming information on social media? And that is there's so many different social media platforms now. Um, and I think, what we look to do as a strategy is say, is there a platform we're not using where an audience we're trying to reach is living? And I think one thing we've looked at notionally in the last year is, Reddit, as a huge platform of where particularly, younger males, that's where they're consuming the information. So I think it's just, constantly surveying the landscape of the available platforms and how those audience segments are shifting. The Facebook audience has gotten typically older over time. Instagram continues to age itself. So what is the next, platform that, younger folks, the Gen Z folks are using? And then, on top of that, social media might not be the answer. I read an article this morning about how Gen Z is doing digital detoxes and not getting on social media. Um, so if they're not on social media, then your whole strategy, kind of falls apart. So it's just constantly understanding how trends are shifting and where your audience segments are consuming their information.
Great. Thank you very much. And now I have a question for Peg. And this is a good one too. So we may ask Stephen to chime in on this one too. But this is the question reads: A recently released Pew study indicates that half of U.S. adults under 50 say they get health and wellness information from social media influencers or podcasts. However, only 4 in 10 of the influencers are professionals. How can we ensure no misinformation is spread by people less in the know? And do you work with influencers? So, Peg.
Yes, such a great question. And it's like Steven said, marketing is constantly evolving. And as professional marketers, we need to keep up with that and make sure we're reaching voters where they are finding their information. So, yeah, authentic storytelling drives behavior change. And we are using credible influencers like the Boat Boss, and we also work with credible gear and equipment manufacturers. And really, it's about promoting the boating lifestyle, making boating look fun because it is. It's my favorite thing to do. It's all of our favorite things to do, right? So if we put it out there as this is a safety message, pay attention, that's really not going to resonate with the audience. But using the influencers, which have to be credible, and what I do is our whole team will look at their page, and we want to make sure we see consistent use of boating safety, not just when they're collaborating with us, right? So credible influencers and those manufacturers and retailers are a great resource.
Okay. Thank you, Peg. Okay, the next question is for Stephen. I'm kind of going out of order, just telling my person behind the scenes. So you said, this is from Lily Colby. Hi, Lily. You said, say more people would mean more output, that growing your media workforce is important. But do you anticipate that with that new AI tools will change that equation?
Sure. So I think AI is an incredible tool to leverage small media teams. For the entire Coast Guard, I have a media team of six. Our social media team was at one point two people. It's now six. Um, it's incredibly helpful for understanding sort of the trends and the analysis. Um, but I don't think that AI will ever be able to replace sort of having a genuine human on platform. I think, when we look at expanding our staff and what's the next step for our social media, we've gotten to a point where we have, content strategies specific to each platform. We have a team of content creators that are now creating high quality organic content. The next step for us is community engagement. How are we engaging with people on platform? Um, and you can do that with AI bots and set up a, AI chat string. Um, but nothing, I don't think right now is going to replace sort of that genuine um, human in the comments section that's moderating these things and also that's looking for that misinformation to count. Like you mentioned, misinformation. I mean, that is just such a huge piece of the media environment. Um, so that's a nice thing. I think, as we look to expand our staff, that's the next step for us is, how are we able to engage with our audience, on platform, whether it's in our inbox, whether it's in the comments section. And I don't, there's plenty of Fortune 500 companies that use AI and they have chat bots that do that. But I think especially in a space such as boating safety, or the Coast Guard missions, to be able to humanize that, I don't think the AI is quite there yet. Maybe someday, but those are my thoughts at the current moment.
You. Thank you very much. So I have another question. I'm not sure you guys are going to be able to answer, but I'm going to ask you anyway, Peg. So you ready for it?
Yeah.
So this is from Mo, and they ask, what is the minimum should a small teaching sailing organization spend in social media for a good return on investments? Any idea?
The thing, Stephen could probably answer this better than I can, but I can
Raise-
tell you on our team, the thing that's expensive is content. Creating the content is the most expensive part of putting anything on social media, right? And the great thing about the U.S. Coast Guard grants is our content is not copyrighted. So once it's Coast Guard approved, it's on our websites and available to everyone in the RBS community. So I'd say use that content and post it on social media. Number one, that you've had a subject matter expert look at it. That content is U.S. Coast Guard approved, and put that out there. And so that's free. The other added expense there might be when you bring in a collaborator. But if you collaborate with one of the nonprofit grant recipients, there's really no cost in that at all. So it's really just leveraging, I think, relationships and making sure that you're using some credible content and working with one of us, and your content can be free.
And I think Stephen had something to add to this.
Sure. I'll just say, if you don't have the money to spend on content, I think it's so important. The last part of that presentation was about data. I think you'll see from my presentation, I'm just such a huge proponent of using data to leverage potentially limited resources, and then understand how you can get the best bang for your buck with whatever you have. And so if you're a small sailing school, I'd love to see you invest maybe $100 a month in some sort of, whether it's Meta Business Suite, whether it's a basic subscription to a Sprinkler, a TalkWalker, a Sprout Social. You don't have to have all the features, but to be able to understand, the content that you are investing in, what's working, doing that A/B testing, understanding your audience segments, that can be done for probably under $100 a month. And that can just create such a better use of your resources and ROI.
Great. All right, our next question, again, I'm going to call on Peg. You're, because she's here. So, how do we get more manufacturers to consistently use safe boating practices in their marketing? I just came across a large brochure for sailfish boats where every photo had people wearing life jackets and kill switches. However, that is not really the norm. And I would say, I know if Jim Emmons was here, he would say that that is one of the things his group is working on. But I will turn it over to Peg because I know she's working on that too.
Yeah, I think it goes back to educating the manufacturers, and our team has many meetings with manufacturers, and sometimes they honestly just don't know. It's not intentional that they are omitting boating safety practices, and a lot of times they don't know that they are influencers, and so we have to remind them that they are influencers in the boating safety space. So I think it's, we sometimes we have to really call them out, but for the most part, it's just an opportunity to educate.
Great. Thank you. Now, I'm going to ask this next question to Brian Raywinkle, okay? Because I know you've put on some campaigns. Brian still on there? Okay, Brian, here we go. The Chicago Harbor Safety Committee plans to implement a Slow It Down campaign to address wake, a major issue in Chicago. And this actually could be Brian or Tom Guest. Are there successful campaigns that can keep messaging consistent nationwide? The Minnesota DNR Own Your Wake looks great. Any ideas for that? Either Brian or Tom?
Um,
Sorry,
can you,
Brian. Brian's like, oh,
yeah.
Tom's coming on. It's okay.
So, so no wake campaigns, they're tough, right? Because wake is so subjective into what is a wake. So in a lot of your newer boats, it seems like if they actually travel faster, they throw a little bit less wake, which is contrary to the no wake laws. But it's really outreach and combined with enforcement, and of course, a lot of times if you put enforcement ahead of outreach and education, then you're really kind of fighting your own battle because people just don't know what they don't know. So I think it's really a media outreach campaign, getting the word out, social media, and then of course locally, radio is still good, but definitely get the word out ahead of time. I think that's probably the key.
Great. Thanks. Now we're running short on time, and so I have one last question that I'm going to pose it to Brian, if he's still on, and to Peg, and to Stephen. Okay. And so that question is, of course, I have it on my phone, and it just so the question is, and the reason why I have a you, Brian, because you go out and you purchase from a media. So I want to know frequently do you refine your and adjust your metrics or messaging priorities based on what you're seeing in the metrics that you're testing. So whoever wants to go first, or Brian's on. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah. Thanks. Yes. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah. How often do
How often do you change, like by looking at the data you collect for your metrics, how often does that cause you to change
we,
your what you're doing?
I had a little Zoom issue, sorry. Uh,
Well, how about this, Brian? We're gonna switch over to Peg. So, and then so basically, with your
Media
metrics and your
plan
data
for the year.
collection, how do you make that? How often do you look at that to change how you're doing your messaging?
Yeah, great question. And sorry, Brian, that you weren't able to jump on that. We're looking at weekly and quarterly reports. Weekly, monthly, and quarterly reports, right? What we want to look at is trends. So If during a week or a month time frame we're seeing a dip in engagement or a spike in engagement, we want to kind of investigate that and find out what's going on. And that's when we might go in and update our KPIs or our dashboard. But it's something that our team monitors very regularly.
And Stephen, I'd like to ask you that same question. I think you kind of touched on it, but how
Sure.
often are you going in and adjusting your metrics?
As far as adjusting our metrics, we have a pretty set of key performance indicators, and that's just based on what we've gotten senior leadership comfortable with. It's, it's admittedly difficult to get, an admiral who is potentially in his 50s and 60s, no offense, comfortable with the intricacies of social media performance. So that takes a lot of education. And so, especially at that very senior leadership level, that C-suite, that boardroom, they get very used to seeing the same thing over and over and over, and then quickly digesting that. So we really try to pick KPIs that provide a good, senior leader picture of our performance. That being said, at the tactical level, day to day, we are consistently looking at over 75 KPIs, whether that's in the earned media space, the social space, to do very deep dives into what content is performing, how is our messaging landing, audience segmentation. And we typically do a sort of a yearly strategy refresh in earned media and social media. And that's all based on strategic messaging from senior leadership, the administration, the department. And so we'll look at that. But it can be as simple as, I mean, we're going in 4 or 5 times a day if we pitched an article, if we posted what we think is a great video, and diving down into that. So it's a little all over the place. I would say we're doing it all pretty much every day to the maximum extent we can. It would be embarrassing if I gave a presentation about my dedication to data and didn't go on platform every day. So yeah, we're using it all at our level. But we certainly there's a distillation for that C-suite, that boardroom.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you guys so much. And thanks for this presentation. We actually had a lot of questions we weren't able to get to. Apologize for that. We'll try to answer some of those offline. So we're going to dive. Someone spoke about deep diving. We're going to dive next into data that drives our decision. The next session, we're going to explore tools like the Boating Accident Report Database, otherwise known as BARD, and the National Recreational Boating Survey, and how they help us understand risk and guide prevention strategies. While you're listening to this next session, think about how reliable is the data we're using to make decisions. What gaps still exist in reporting or analysis? And how can stronger, more complete data sets help to lead to more effective safety programs? So we're going to, again, head out to the lobby and hit the next session. Use the Q&A panel to ask your questions to our host, Jonathan Shea, and his panel.